There were nights when even the guards outside could hear them raise voices cutting through Montecito's quiet air, arguments that always circled back to the same name, Marcus. It started small, a misplaced text, a casual reference, an old memory that refused to stay buried. But every conversation eventually found its way back to him, Marcus Anderson, the ghost in their marriage. One night, it went too far. Harry had been scrolling through Meghan's old laptop, searching for photos to include in the charity anniversary post. Instead, he found something else, a folder buried deep, innocently titled Old Times. Inside, dozens of photos from her early years in Toronto, parties, dinners, vacations, and in almost every frame, Marcus, his hand on her shoulder, his face close to Hayes, that same familiarity that had always made Harry uneasy. That night, he didn't sleep till BY morning. His security detail quietly escorted him to a private retreat in Aspen. The statement that followed was brief. The Duke is taking personal time for reflection. But everyone close to them knew what it meant that it was the first real separation since they'd left the palace, a pause in the fairy tale. And behind the walls of that sprawling California mansion, Meghan was left with a question no press release could answer. Had she truly moved on from Marcus, or had she simply built her new life on top of his shadow? While the Sussexes unraveled in private, London was burning in silence. The palace had faced scandals before, racism claims, media feuds, tell-all interviews. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, uncontrollable. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood was grim. Advisors gathered in late-night crisis meetings, every headline dissected, every statement weighed. One senior aide reportedly said, "This isn't about Meghan anymore. It's about what he might know." The he, of course, was Marcus Anderson, the outsider who had walked through their homes, sat at their tables, and flown on their planes thought he'd seen the crown's most private moments. And now, the fear wasn't what he had said, but what he might still say. NDAs were reviewed, confidentiality contracts reissued. Lawyers whispered across time zones. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The illusion had cracked, and through that crack, the world had seen something raw and human. William and Kate were reportedly furious, not out of jealousy, but frustration. All their work to restore stability, undone by a single man's careless words. One aide quoted William muttering, "We survived Oprah, but this makes us look like fools." For centuries, the monarchy had feared revolution, scandal, war, but never gossip, and yet here it was, a single confession from a man who didn't belong to their world, now threatening to redefine it. In the end, every fairy tale exacted a price. For Meghan, it was a piece. For Harry, his trust, and for Marcus, the man who lit the fuse, it was his reputation. Harry eventually returned home. They smiled for cameras, walked hand in hand, and pretended forgiveness had settled in. But those close to them saw the difference, a distance behind the eyes, a pause in the laughter, a silence that wasn't there before. Meghan's once glittering circle began to shrink, invitations faded. Old friends stopped calling. Marcus vanished into the same background he'd once ruled, spotted occasionally in London cafes, always composed, always unreadable. Some say he regrets it, others say he planned it. But maybe the truth doesn't matter anymore, because what Marcus revealed wasn't just scandal, it was fragility, that even behind crowns and cameras, the stories we worship are still built by human hands. And sometimes, all it takes is one sentence to turn a love story into a legend of what might have been. But here's the interesting part. Sarah Ferguson didn't just hear the whispers. She lived in the middle of them. She was part of the very ecosystem Meghan had allegedly stepped into long before the palace romance began. Let's rewind for a second. Sarah Fergie Ferguson has always been more than a royal footnote. Even after her divorce from Prince Andrew, she remained deeply connected, socially, financially, and through networks that thrived on influence and privilege. She knew the jet-setters, the financiers, the Mediterranean elites, the ones who never made headlines but quietly owned them. And that's why the Meghan connection raised eyebrows inside the royal circle. Because if the Yacht whispers were even half true, if those social overlaps existed, then Fergie would know, not from gossip columns, from personal experience, from shared guest lists, mutual acquaintances, and those private events where cameras were never allowed but stories never died. Now, here's where things twist. When Meghan sat across from Oprah in 2021 and said she was already friends with Princess Eugenie before Harry, it sounded innocent enough. But to people in the know, it was a quiet red flag, because friendship with Eugenie meant proximity to Fergie, and through Fergie, direct access to circles Meghan wasn't supposed to know before Harry.so. The blind date story, the palace-approved fairy tale, starts afray at the edges. How blind can a meeting be if the social circles were already crossing long before? Let's connect the dots. Marcus Anderson, Meghan's close confidant and network builder, had deep ties in London's private club scene through Soho House. Ron Burkle, billionaire, philanthropist, and known yacht owner, was part of that same elite sphere, and Andrew? His reputation for attending exclusive gatherings on private yachts is well documented. Different people, same rooms, different stories, same scene. So when whispers say that Meghan may have been seen at the same events as Andrew or Fergie before Suits fame, it doesn't sound like wild conspiracy anymore. The IT sounds like overlapping privilege, a quiet world of exclusivity where introductions were currency and appearances were everything. To be clear, none of this proves anything sinister, but it does suggest something crucial, that Meghan's path into royalty wasn't accidental, that IT was gradual, deliberate, and guided by connections that existed long before that so-called blind date. And if Sarah Ferguson really was present in those years, if she did see Meghan in those elite circles before Harry, then she holds a missing piece to the entire timeline. Not because she's trying to expose Meghan, but because she knows exactly where the official story doesn't match the private one. Because inside the royal world, truth doesn't always come from press. Sometimes it comes from the people who were standing quietly in the background, watching the game long before the rest of us even knew it had begun. Soho House wasn't just a members-only club. IT was a network, the invisible bridge between Hollywood and high society, a place where deals were made, secrets were traded, and reputations were built. Marcus Anderson, Meghan's longtime confidant, wasn't just an employee there, he was a gatekeeper. He decided who got in, who mingled, who connected. And in that world, introductions were never random. They were curated. Fergie knew that world too. In the early 2010s, she attended events with several Soho House regulars, designers, financiers, and London social power players. She was always on the edge of the same crowd Meghan was trying to enter. If Fergie truly had insight into those overlapping circles, she wouldn't need to expose state secrets. She could simply outline the timeline, connect names, and suddenly, the fairy tale meeting between Harry and Meghan stops looking quite so innocent. Now imagine what happens if she puts that in print. A chapter that quietly hints that Meghan's rise wasn't accidental. That key introductions, the ones leading directly to Prince Harry, were engineered, not fated. That narrative alone would detonate the Sussex brand of modern love and destiny. And the palace wouldn't need to lift a finger. That's why whispers say certain insiders wouldn't stop her from writing it. They wouldn't openly back her, but they wouldn't interfere either. Because if Fergie tells her story carefully, targeting Meghan, not the monarchy, she becomes useful again. A counter-narrative wrapped in personal memoir. And here's what makes her so volatile. Fergie is reportedly facing mounting financial pressure. Her properties are expensive, her income uncertain, and her long-standing connection to Prince Andrew keeps doors closed. A tell-all, especially one that shifts public sympathy away from the Sussexes, could be both lucrative and redemptive. The IT would make her relevant again. She's been underestimated before, but Fergie has survived more scandals than most royals have faced in a lifetime. She knows timing. She knows when to play loyal, and when to remind the world she knows more than she's ever said. If she really does hold evidence, even casual proof, of Meghan's pre-Harry social ties, those yacht rumors, or the real How We Met story, then she's holding something far more powerful than gossip. She's holding the ability to rewrite history and to sell it. Marcus Anderson wasn't just a friend. He was the architect of Meghan's ascent. During her Suits years, he was the one who opened doors most people never even saw. He moved effortlessly between worlds, Hollywood elites, European aristocrats, and British royalty. And Meghan was always just a step behind him. He introduced her to power, to influence, to the people who could change her life. That if anyone knows the real timeline, who opened which doors, when and why, it's Marcus Anderson. And just beyond his orbit stood Sarah Ferguson, watching from the edge of those same glittering circles. Fergie wasn't oblivious. She attended the same events, crossed paths with the same players, and saw the same faces that would later define Meghan's royal story. Take the Jamaica wedding. She was there. She saw Meghan's poise, her confidence, her comfort in a world she supposedly didn't know. Tom Bow described her as already acting like royalty years before she wore a crown. That's not coincidence. That's preparation. Then there were the Mediterranean gatherings, those exclusive yacht events whispered about in royal gossip circles that if Fergie ever saw Meghan within that world, surrounded by Andrew's acquaintances, Ron Burkle's business crowd, or Marcus Anderson's social set, it destroys the myth of the outsider who stumbled into royalty to IT replaces it with something colder, more calculated, intentional positioning. And then comes a friendship that changes everything. Princess Eugenie.by Meghan's own words, they were close before Harry. Not casual acquaintances. Friends that so how does an American actress, thousands of miles from London, become genuine friends with a British princess before meeting the prince. If Fergie helped facilitate that friendship, or even simply witness it, the blind date story collapses to IT wasn't serendipity. It was strategy. Now, none of this makes Meghan guilty of anything. Networking isn't a crime. Ambition isn't deceit, but it does contradict the story she and Harry have built their empire on: authenticity, victimhood, truth, and that contradiction gives Fergie something far more powerful than money. It gives her leverage, because if Fergie were to speak, if she were to hint that Meghan's fairytale beginning was crafted, not discovered, she wouldn't just challenge a narrative that she'd undermine a brand, and Meghan can't easily fight back, though if she denies it. She invites questions about Eugenie, about Jamaica, about Soho House, that if she stays silent, the doubt grows louder. It's a trap, one Meghan can't win, and Fergie knows it. And right now, Fergie has nothing left to lose as she's losing Royal Lodge, her income, her reputation, all fading fast. But she still has one thing of value: information, and in the royal world, that's the only currency that ever truly matters. And history tells us something simple but brutal. Desperate people with insider knowledge never stay silent for long. The speculation now is that Sarah Ferguson isn't just talking to publishers. She's negotiating with palace officials. Sources close to royal circles claim quiet conversations are happening behind closed doors. King Charles, some say, might be open to certain concessions if it keeps old secrets from resurfacing. But William? William doesn't care. He's reportedly said to be untouchable, clean, composed, and with nothing Fergie could weaponize. And that's exactly why Meghan becomes useful. Because if Fergie turns her sights on Meghan, everyone wins. Except Meghan. Fergie gets a redemption arc in a best-selling book. The palace gets a convenient distraction from bigger scandals. And the press get the kind of storm that prints money. The question is, will Fergie actually pull the trigger? So far, there's no official book deal, no confirmed manuscript, no press release. But the whispers are deafening. Meghan, meanwhile, has gone completely silent. No statements. No olive branches. No reconciliation attempts. She's betting that ignoring the noise will make it fade, that Fergie won't actually burn what's left of her royal bridges. But that strategy assumes Fergie still has something left to protect. And right now, that doesn't look true. The irony here is almost poetic. Meghan Markle, the woman who built her global image on being mistreated by the establishment, is facing off against a woman who lived that same nightmare decades earlier. Fergie was a blueprint. The outsider who married in was adored, then destroyed, and later reinvented herself through media. Meghan just modernized it. Both mastered the art of narrative. Both understood that in today's monarchy, perception is the only power that matters. The difference? Fergie's been playing this game since Meghan was in high school. And that's what makes this so dangerous. Because if Fergie talks, if she confirms that Meghan's blind date story was PR polish, if she provides evidence that those connections existed long before Harry, then Meghan's empire doesn't just take a hit. It collapses. Her authenticity, her underdog image, the foundation of the Sussex brand, all of it crumbles. Right now, Fergie sits alone in Royal Lodge, facing eviction, watching her legacy slip away while Meghan lives out the life she once wanted. Luxury, fame, relevance. That's not a woman who stays quiet. That's a woman who plots her comeback. And if those close to her are right, if she really does know the true timeline of how Meghan entered royal circles, then this isn't about gossip anymore. This is about receipts, because in the royal world, there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. For decades, it was in Fergie's interest to protect Meghan. That calculation has changed, and when calculations change in that world, secrets stop being guarded, they start being sold. Maybe Meghan should have taken those calls. Maybe she should have helped, because now, Fergie, stripped of her home, her influence, and her silence is the one person Meghan can't afford to have against her. And that's the real danger. Not what Fergie knows, but what she's finally ready to say. The truth is, we don't know when, or if, the book will drop that we don't know how deep the secrets go. But what we do know is that once someone with access feels betrayed, they talk. And when that happens, stories don't just resurface, they explode. So what do you think? Is Fergie bluffing? Or is Meghan's past about to come crashing back with proof? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're still watching this far. And make sure you subscribe, because the next chapter in this royal fallout might be the biggest one yet.